Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Inside the Conservative Party conference, where there's a sense of satisfaction that they've won an election, they have a story and they're sticking to it. Outside, there are protests. They are sticking two fingers up at the Tories and everyone within. But most remarkable today, the leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, has done what oppositions never do. He's come to town to be on an anti-Tory platform. If you want an example of the kind of culture clash that's now so evident in British politics, here it is. Inside the Tory conference is a relatively genteel affair. The party's trying not to be smug, mostly successfully, but they know they're in a good place. It's called government.
And this is a beginning. A beautiful beginning, but it's just a beginning.
Outside, it's a different country. More protest than usual this year.
Is it important that this protest is while the Conservatives are over there meeting in Manchester?
Well, obviously, because we need to show that, there's a resistance to the Tories in this city. It's not a Tory city, Manchester. It never really has been. So they can come here all they want, but we're going to show that actually you're not really that welcome.
I think that the amount of spitting and swearing and stuff we've seen, compared to the number of people that's been out, it's just not comparable. You can't have huge protests and not have some people who are going to be doing things like that. But I think the majority of people here, they don't want to spit, they don't want to throw eggs. They want to just show how we feel about these horrible things the Tory party are doing at the moment.
This is a communication workers' union rally. It's nothing to do with the more vicious protests we've seen over the last couple of days. But this is the Overspill group. The real event is inside Manchester Cathedral over there. But speaking inside and outside the cathedral, there's no doubt who the star is tonight. Dave Ward of the Communications Workers' Union said, Corbyn is here breaking the rituals of the sterile politics, and there's no law to turning up in your opposing party's conference city. But it shows just how hot the political argument's getting in this country.
We want to live in a society that actually does genuinely ensure that nobody is living in desperate poverty, and we do not pass by on the other side while others are suffering. That is the kind of world I want to live in.
Jeremy Corbyn has promised a kind of politics, but he's still offering one that has some bite. Well before those events, this morning in fact, I sat down with the Prime Minister for his first Newsnight interview since the election. A lot has changed since I last spoke to him, with the government now actually having to deliver the things it was merely talking about back then. Prime Minister, obviously it's been an interesting summer politically. Jeremy Corbyn's taken over the Labour Party. There's a lot of talk of new politics. Some find it very messy and shambolic, others think it's very refreshing. Have you seen anything you like in the Corbyn style of leadership?
Well, I think that the idea of trying to make Prime Minister's questions sort of more genuine question and answer, a quieter house, more ability to answer a question and make an argument, I like that. That would be good. I don't know how long it'll last, because Prime Minister's questions tends to move towards the gladiatorial. It's just the way it's sort of set up, but I like that. Look, it's good to have debate. I think Labour have made a massive mistake, heading off to the left, as I put it, heading off to the hills. But it means we're going to have a debate about real issues. I want to get into the argument why unilateral nuclear disarment's a bad idea, it'll make us less safe, why nationalisation doesn't work. These are big issues, big arguments, and if that's the debate we're going to have, then I look forward to it.
I mean, in style, though, there's sort of sense that he's more straightforward, says what he thinks perhaps more than some other leading politicians. I wonder whether you're attracted to that straightforwardness. Maybe the political communication has got a little bit too tensed up. And
no, there's a case for saying that, and he's engaging the way he answers questions and talks. But, politics in the end is about forming a team with a clear plan and demonstrating that you can be a government, in our case, or an alternative government in their case. And if you are endlessly having a debate, incapable of agreeing amongst yourselves, even on really important issues like the defence of the nation, the public will conclude you won't be able to do what we want, which is to deliver strong, sound, sensible government. So debate, yes, but at the end of the debate, you have to decide, and then you do need people to stick to a common position.
We might come to strong leadership and divided parties in a few minutes. Let's talk, though, about straightforwardness and one of the issues that's been dominating so far here, tax credits and the plan to cut them. Because you've presented the tax credit plan as a kind of something for something deal. You're going to have cuts in tax credits for working households, but there's an increase in the national living wage, which is...
And a cut in taxation. And added to that, equally important, is in order that business can pay this national living wage, a tax cut for business, because that particularly is important for small businesses. This was a package put together, which I think long-term does help make work pay, but also crucially reduces the costs of welfare so that we can keep taxes down and afford to fund our National Health Service and our schools.
And I think the Chancellor called it a new settlement, lower welfare, higher wages, a sort of a better nation. Everyone will agree with that. What proportion of the cuts to the incomes of working households that you're making will be restored by the national living wage? So you've got households losing through tax credit cuts. The IFS has published a figure as to how much of that will be given back to them through the national living wage.
Well,
you know what the figure
obviously,
is?
Look, different households are going to be affected
Indeed,
differently.
But what in total, what proportion of the money being taken away has been given back?
Well, the way I would prefer to put it is if you take a family where you've got someone on minimum wage working a full-time week, when you take all the changes into account, they will be better off by £2,400 a year. So, but as I say, different families will be affected differently.
But the specific proportion of the money being taken away, the £6 billion, what proportion has been given back to those working households who are
that
losing?
is going to depend on how many are on. It's going to depend how many people are on minimum wage. It also depends what happens crucially to wages above minimum wage.
The IFS, they've done the maths. They've done them. Have you read the 15-page IFS?
I've looked at their report. Absolutely, and I've looked at the figures.
Well, then you will have seen the figure. The figure is a quarter of what is being taken away has been given back through the national living wage.
But obviously that doesn't include the tax cuts, though.
Right,
but that is important. So next year you're going to be able to earn £11,000 before you start paying any income tax together. So you have to take all of these things together, plus the fact that wages are rising in our economy, now at a rate above the rate of inflation. So when you take all these things into account, as I put it, and the Chancellor's put it, a higher wage, lower tax, lower welfare economy will be a stronger economy.
But the basic issue here, which has not been really much discussed, is that the national living wage goes to earners and tax credits go to households and families. There are lots of people on the national living wage who, you know, they're in a household that's actually quite well off. They maybe have a rich husband or wife. So they're working part-time, they're earning the minimum wage, but they're not in a poor household. There are many people, because they have high needs, they maybe have 3 or 4 children, who are well above the minimum wage, but they still need those tax credits and they're losing money.
I think you're making a very important point, which is if you stand back, what is this debate all about? For many years, Labour used a tax credit system to try and tackle poverty in our country, making the argument you're making, and they were trying to lift people just above a particular line. But when we look back, we can see that it didn't work. The tax credit system went from, in 1998, from about 8 billion in cost to about 30 billion when I became Prime Minister. But during that period, in-work poverty actually went up, so it didn't work. Our argument, and this is a really fundamental argument. Our argument is, if you want to tackle poverty, you've got to tackle the causes of poverty. So that's getting more people a job, making sure those jobs are well paid, making sure work pays, and then tackling things that keep people stuck in poverty, like poor schools or poor housing or drug abuse and indebtedness. Tackling the causes of poverty is more powerful, I would argue, than actually just what Nick Clegg rightly called the poverty plus a pound of using the tax credit system to lift people over an artificial line.
But why then, and this is, why then have you focused such a big part of the tax credit cuts specifically on working household? You know, the IFS say the biggest change has been what sounds like a technical thing, which is the reduction in what's called the work allowance. So it only affects the people who are working. What that really means is that the cuts will be bigger for people in work than they will be for people out of work. So it's completely inconsistent with what you said in the election, which is the infuriating thing is for hardworking people,
to see, you know, if you did the right thing, you were penalised. If you did the wrong thing, you were rewarded.
But you're only looking at part of the picture, because of course another of our welfare changes is to freeze the out-of-work benefits for 4 years, sensible at a time of low inflation.
All working age benefits are being frozen in for working and non-working.
But no,
families.
but that particularly does impact for the unemployment
but it
benefits as
affects
well.
the
So you have to look at the
in-workers-
point.
it affects
yeah,
the
but we
in-work
made
as
a
well, that
we
one.
made a promise at the election. Go back to the manifesto about making changes to welfare so that we could go on increasing money into our National Health Service and funding properly our schools. And then we sat down to deliver these welfare changes, which we've done at the same time as introducing, for the first time, a national living wage, which will, you know, let's not forget this. Next year, someone on minimum wages would effectively get a £20 a week pay rise because of this new national living wage.
I come back to the point that the living wage and the tax credits are going to two different groups of people very largely, and there are two instruments that do different things.
In the end,
and you're combining them as though
making
they're one
work
and the
pay.
same.
The best way to tackle poverty is to create jobs,
That would be
make
nice.
work pay, and cut people's taxes. Now, this government that I lead, we've created over 2 million jobs. We've now got wages rising. We're introducing a national living wage that will be £9 an hour,
taking money
and we're
away.
cutting people's taxes.
Right.
But in the end, I accept this is a big choice. You know, the old Labour model was low pay, take away people's taxes, recycle that money through the tax credit system, and use that to try and tackle poverty. It didn't work, and it landed us with an unaffordable welfare system. Now, we inherited a situation with the 10% budget deficit, the need to get that down,
No, we're
to make
aware of that
savings to
argument.
welfare, and at the same time making work pay. So I think actually our approach is the right one.
Do you think you have a mandate for these changes, given
Yes,
what
I
was
think
said
that
during the
we-
election campaign?
We do. We said in the election campaign that we were going to make welfare savings and we were going to cut people's taxes. We didn't actually announce in the campaign the national living wage. We've been able to do that because we made other changes.
I appreciate what you're saying, but you know, you will know that in the election question time, you were specifically asked about child tax credit. Are you absolutely saying as a guarantee it'll never happen? This is referring to a plan to cut child credit and tax credits. You said child tax credit we increased by £450. David Dimbleby said, and it's not going to fall. And you said it's not going to fall.
Well, that's right. The child tax credit that people get, the basic level of child tax credit with the child tax credit premium, that stays the same.
The first child premium, the family bit is coming down.
No, what is happening is that as people earn more, those benefits are tapered away. We've changed. We have changed that.
The first child element to the
no, for new families. So there's a difference between the stock of families where the exact arrangements stay for the amount of child tax credit. It's tapered away faster as you earn
So
more
there
money.
were terms and conditions to the statement. It's not going to fall on the child tax credit.
The basic level of child tax
for new
credit
families
for existing claimants has not
Right.
fallen.
Okay. During the election, you absolutely were asked day after day where the 12 billion were going to come from, weren't you? The 12 billion of welfare cuts.
Yeah.
Where are they going to come from? And you kept saying, we can't tell you, we can't tell you, we can't tell you. You had announced 2 years before that there were going to be 12 billion of welfare cuts. You couldn't tell us. A few weeks after the election, you have told us, and they're very substantially affecting working families with children.
Well, there are a range of
There are
changes.
lots of them,
there
but
are a
they
range
substantially
to
affect
welfare
working families,
changes.
low-income working families with children are bearing
Well,
the
they
brunt.
also, as I say, they also affect the key out-of-work benefits at a time of low inflation, when pay for many years has been relatively subdued. But we made a promise that we were going to find savings in welfare, not least because if you don't do that,
But why couldn't you
have to
specify?
make
I know
cuts.
you made that
Yeah.
promise, but why couldn't you specify what the changes would be before the election, and then after the election, you tell us they're going to mainly affect working families?
Well, we
with
wanted to
children?
take it, as we said, that it would be right to have a proper budget after the election, where you look at spending plans, you
You'd
look
had
at
2
tax
years
plans.
to think about it. You knew you were going to make these
but
changes.
I did. I answered all these questions before
No, you
the
didn't.
election.
You said you can't answer them.
But because we needed to have a budget, and in that budget, we made a number of new ways forward in terms of making sure we taxed, for instance, non-DOMs properly. That was a big change. So we made a lot of changes in the budget, which enabled us then to set out some things, like, for instance, the 10 billion more into the health service. We didn't say before the election it would be 10 billion, but it has turned out to be 10 billion.
Isn't this the sort of thing that has given politics a bad name? Just not answering a question,
I don't accept that.
obfuscation, and then after the election, suddenly...
I don't accept that. We went
12
into the
billion.
election very clearly. Look, I mean, I would argue, we went into the election very clearly saying we are going to make savings in the welfare system. We also said that we're not going to protect spending departments outside the ones that we'd identified. So, you've been interviewing politicians for years, how many politicians can you remember going into an election very clearly saying we have not finished the job, we're going to have to make further spending
Everybody
reductions?
agrees with, well, not everybody, a lot of people agree with cutting welfare in abstract. It's just when you cite a specific cut, they say that one doesn't seem very desirable. And that it doesn't seem like it was a terribly straightforward approach. And I just put it to you again, that it's the kind of thing that gives politics a bad name.
But I don't accept that. I think we were very frank before the election about the overall plans that we had. And I think, we won a mandate at that election to deliver those changes. And that's exactly what we're doing now.
One other issue, again, where the new politics and conservative politics may come up against each other.
Is it really new politics?
No,
I challenge this for a moment. Actually, what you saw at the Labour conference was let's have nationalisation, let's have unilateral nationalisation, let's have high rates of taxes. To me, it's very old politics. But I recognise lots of people weren't alive in the 1980s, and we've got to make these arguments again. But a lot of what I hear from Corbyn is desperately old, outdated, failed politics. It's not very new.
I'm putting it to you as questions, with question mark. Look, another issue. 18 months ago, Michael Gove said he thought it was ridiculous how many Etonians were in frontline politics in the Tory party. You, obviously, your Chief of Staff, Ed Llewellyn, the Mayor of London. 18 months later, you've done it again, haven't you? You've just selected a new mayor.
Well, I haven't selected him. He was voted for by our members. That is new politics. Okay. It wasn't fixed in some dark back room.
Is there a danger that it'll make the Tory party look very out of touch?
I would say, you're at the conference. Spend a bit of time here meeting our new members of Parliament, and you will find that the Conservative Party has got a far more diverse set of members of Parliament than 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I mean,
20 MPs who went to one school. The Brit School in Croydon, the Performing Arts School, has produced so many great, talented artists like Adele and Amy Winehouse.
But look at the number of women MPs, for instance.
What is going on, do you think, that Eton can provide 20 Tory MPs?
Look, it's a very good school. But the point I'd make is this. When I became leader of the Tory party, there were 19 women MPs, Conservative women MPs. We're now well over 50. So big changes have taken place. Look at some of the new people who are not just our candidates, but who won in safe Conservative seats. I walked over actually here for this interview with one, Nusrat Ghani, in the safe seat of Wealdon. So big changes have taken place in the Conservative Party, and you can't deny that. Look at our MPs, look at the talent, look at the diversity of where people have come from, and you see all of Britain represented on the green benches of the Conservative Party.
You will hope that the next leader perhaps will come from a state school.
Look, it's not for me to choose. It will be chosen by, first, the members of Parliament, and then by the members. It's not, we don't have a sort of system of coronation, and that's not the way it works.
Have you spoken to George Osborne about leadership and his own
I've spoken to George Osborne about lots of things, but, in the end, it will be the members of Parliament and the members of the party who will decide.
Would you send your own son to Eton?
I've got my own son at a very good state school in London. He's loving it. My daughter is at an excellent secondary state school in London. I've always said I'll do the right thing for my children, but I've said I always want them to be in the state sector. I think the state sector is improving massively and has done so in recent years, but that's my plan. But as I said, I'll always do the right thing for them.
Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
David Cameron there on several topics. Well, it's actually been the Chancellor's day today. His speech was the main event. The general view was that it was a well-crafted speech, but not so charismatic in the delivery. And it included a whopper, a whopping great policy announcement on reform of local government finance.
Today, I'm embarking on the biggest transfer of power to our local government in living memory. We're going to allow local government to keep the rates they collect from business. That's right, all £26 billion of business rates will be kept by councils instead of being sent up to Whitehall.
Well, I'm joined by our policy editor, Chris Cook, our political editor, Allegra Stratton. Evening both. Chris, look, tell us about this devolution revolution that he's talking about. What happens now and how is it going to change?
So the big idea they punted today is that councils who help businesses grow and to attract businesses to them should keep more tax revenue. And it all works through business rates, which are unfortunately quite a complicated thing. So my apologies if viewers feel they have to get their head around the tax system. But the way it basically works is it's like council tax for businesses. So you get charged a certain amount if you're a business on the value of the premises you work from. What's unusual about business rates is that there's something called the universal business rate, which means that every single council in the country has to charge the same rate of tax. There's a second odd thing about it, which is that the councils take all the money in, they assess everything, they do all that, then they immediately hand half of it over to the Treasury. The remaining half, they also don't get to quite keep themselves. There's a sort of process so that very rich councils give over some money to very poor councils. The plans today are that local authorities should, first of all, not hand any more money back over to the Treasury. So they should still do that process of what they call equivalisation. So they still be giving money from very rich areas with lots of business rate income to poorer areas. But from now on, if a council does something to improve their business rate income, they'll get to keep it all. It won't be taken off them. And one of the ways that the government is now going to let them do that is by varying their business rate. So for the first time since 1988, local councils will have the ability to change local taxes on businesses.
So they keep any money they can earn this way, and it's the end of the national uniform business rate.
Exactly.
There must be winners and losers from a thing like this.
There are, and the problem is all the devil is in the detail. So that process I mentioned, equivalisation, fundamentally, if you have a system that is really devil take the hindmost, people who do very well to keep all the money, you will encourage some phenomenal high flyers to do very well, and some councils will be left behind. So the effectiveness of the policy will hinge effectively on a judgment about how regularly we want to sort of intervene to redistribute that money and how aggressively we want to intervene. So that is the fundamental thing. We don't know how big this is because we don't know how
free a market is going to be between councils.
Taxes, to allow tax competition.
Chris, thanks. Well, Allegra, it seems to be a fairly united party in most respects on the stage. Any blots on the landscape, clouds on the horizon?
There is a cloud, there is a blot. It is the tax credit change you went round the Houses with the Prime Minister on. This morning, the Sun newspaper came out and said they just don't agree with this change, that it's wrong. The Sun to be ranged against you is pretty gloomy stuff. All day, all weekend, the Chancellor, the Prime Minister defending this change, but it's really sticky. I know Cabinet Ministers that don't like it, and they've been defended today by Cabinet Minister Jeremy Hunt with perhaps a slightly overzealous defence. He said, this is a jolly good thing, and then he went on to say we need to remove tax credits in these ways because it's an important cultural signal and it shows that we're prepared to be a country that will work hard in the way that Asian economies are, and China in particular. This is not language you'll ever hear the Prime Minister use. He wouldn't in your interview earlier. It's going too far the other direction. Now, the bigger, blonder blot is Boris Johnson. He always is a thorn in their side. Tomorrow, when he makes his speech to conference, is no different. In it, we're told in the extracts of his speech that are coming out tonight that he will also be attacking this tax credit change. And he will say, again, I'm sorry I'm looking at my phone, but it's easier than a notepad. He is saying that as we reform welfare and cut taxes, we have to protect the lowest paid. So again, this is all sides, apart from Jeremy Hunt, all sides saying you cannot be moving as drastically as you are on tax credit changes. In my view, it's a question of when, not if, they move to soften the blow.
Thank you both very much indeed.
I've been getting away